Hi, I'm going to be giving my persuasive speech on why I think children shouldn't be allowed to play violent video games. My goal here is to kind of appeal and talk to the parents because it's going to be up to the parents as to what their children are and aren't allowed to play. So I just kind of want to raise some awareness and open some eyes as to the negative effects and consequences that these games can have on your children, and maybe have you think twice before you go and buy a game for your child. In a study done by the American Psychological Society Journal, it was found that in kids in 8th through 12th grade, 90% of the parents didn't check the ratings of a video game before buying it, and only 1% didn't buy a game because of the rating. I think this is pretty significant because if you don't know the ratings of a game before you buy it, you have no idea as to the level of violence that is in the game, or even what the appropriate age is recommended by the creator of the game. So I just want to open some eyes to the parents and have them take that responsibility as to what their children are and aren't going to be allowed to play. I'd like to start out more with the mental effects that these violent video games can have on children. And this is going to include things like a change in behavior or an increase in aggression. So in a study done by Craig Anderson and Brad Bushman, it was ultimately found that these violent video games cause an increase in aggression. And in their study they refer to aggression as aggressive cognition, which is basically aggressive thinking or aggressive thoughts. They also found that repetitive playing of these games just reinforces that aggressive cognition. So what they state in the results that they believe is aggressive cognition is more short-term. So you can have these aggressive thoughts and thinking at a certain point in the day, or they last for only a certain amount of time, but then they may go away. But they found that aggressive cognition is the basis for a long-term aggressive personality. So if you're repetitively playing a violent video game, it's going to continually enforce this aggressive cognition and can possibly lead to a long-term aggressive personality. And something that kind of stuck with me in this study, they were trying to compare how strong that link of violence is to an increase in aggression. What they compared it to is the strength of condom use on the effect of HIV. So I'm not trying to get too graphic here, but I just think that goes to show how strong of a correlation there is between violence and an increase in aggression. Psychologists believe this kind of cause and effect between violence and aggression is due to the violence viewing effect. There's two factors to this violence viewing effect. The first one is imitation, and this was kind of found in an experiment called the Bobo experiment. And what happened in this experiment was children are asked to watch something violent, and immediately after they watch this violent video or game, violent play increased 7-fold. So basically what's happening is they're seeing this violent act and they're wanting to imitate it in their real life. The second factor to this effect is desensitization. It's known that repeated exposure to violence causes people and children to become indifferent to violence. So something that may seem violent to a child in the first place, after repeatedly seeing it or playing it in a game, it may not seem violent to them and may cause them to perform some sort of violent act because they're no longer aware that it's violent. The next thing I kind of want to go over is more towards the extreme effect that violent video games may have. In 3 school shootings, one of them including was Columbine, the only thing that they found similar between all the school shooters was that they played violent video games. In Columbine, it was a game called Doom. And I'm not trying to insinuate that any child that plays a violent video game is suddenly going to become a murderer. I just think that this is really damning evidence that violent video games can completely alter a person's personality and change their behaviors or even reinforce a violent behavior that may have been there in the first place. The next part of my speech, I kind of want to go over how it's proven that violent video games can physically alter a child. And what I'm going to go over here is violent video games have been proven to decrease brain function. And this was found in a study. People were asked to play a violent video game for 10 hours throughout a week. And throughout the playing of these games, and then scans 1 and 2 weeks later, the scans were MRI scans. So as images of your brain showing brain function levels, it was found that while playing these games, and then in the scan 1 week later, so the effects are up to a week later, there was a decrease in frontal lobe brain function. I think this is really the most disturbing evidence that I found while researching this subject. To me, there's nothing positive that comes from having a decrease in brain function. And it's found to be even stronger in children. So, as an adult, you have a decrease in brain function, but children, it decreases to almost no level of activity in the frontal lobe. And just to go over what the frontal lobe is responsible for, it's responsible for enabling judgment, planning, and processing new memories, among other things. So frontal lobe damage, or a decrease in frontal lobe function, can cause changes in your personality, and it can also remove your inhibitions. So if you have no inhibitions and you want to imitate something that you're seeing and you're desensitized, a child is so much more likely to act violent or aggressive towards another person because they don't think it's wrong anymore, they think it's okay, and there's nothing preventing them from doing it because they have no inhibitions of doing it in the first place. And like I said in the beginning, I'd just like to stress that I'm not trying to ban the selling of violent video games. There was actually even a law in California. They tried and failed to pass they were trying to ban the selling of violent video games to minors. I think this never will work because it is and always will be the parents' responsibility as to what their children should be playing. So what I'm aiming to do here is just kind of raise some awareness and, like I said, open some eyes that the negative effects and consequences that have been proven these games that have on children. There's such a large variety of video games out there that aren't violent in the first place that I just don't understand what positive can come out of a violent video game that will outweigh these negative effects and consequences. So like I said, I hope I raise some awareness, open some eyes, maybe make you parents think twice before you buy any violent video game for your child. Thanks for listening.